The Montana Territory winter bit hard as the stagecoach rolled into Silver Creek, snow swirling around its wheels like dancing ghosts of forgotten promises. Inside, Charlotte Adams clutched her 4-month-old twins closer, trying to shield them from the chill that seeped through the coach's wooden frame. Little Emily fussed against her shoulder while Michael slept, his tiny face peaceful despite the jostling of the rough road. "Almost there, my loves," Charlotte whispered, pressing a kiss to Emily's downy head. At 23, Charlotte had already weathered more storms than most twice her age. The war had taken her brother. Illness had claimed her parents and Samuel Adams. Her husband, of barely a year, had been killed in a mining accident 2 months before the twins were born. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Left alone in Boston with mounting debts and no family to turn. 2. Charlotte had made the hardest decision of her life. The newspaper advertisement still felt crisp in her memory, though the actual clipping was worn thin from constant handling. Established rancher seeks respectable Eastern widow for marriage. Position offers stability and good standing in a growing township. J.M. After weeks of correspondence, Jack Morrison's letters had convinced her that Silver Creek could offer her children the future Boston couldn't. Fresh air instead of factory smoke, open spaces instead of crowded tenements, and most importantly, a father figure who had written of his eagerness to provide for a ready-made family. Charlotte had sold everything except her wedding band, her grandmother's pearl hairpin, and what clothing and necessities she could pack in one trunk to fund the journey west. The rest of her small inheritance had purchased passage for her and the twins on the Northern Pacific Railroad as far as Helena, then the stagecoach to Silver Creek. Jack's last letter, tucked securely in her coat pocket alongside the others, had promised he would meet her at the stagecoach stop. "Silver Creek, final stop," the driver called, his voice nearly lost in the howling wind. Charlotte adjusted her threadbare wool coat and gathered Emily more securely in her left arm while balancing Michael in her right. How she would manage to disembark with both babies and retrieve her trunk was a puzzle she hadn't yet solved when the stagecoach door swung open. "Need a hand, ma'am?" The driver, a grizzled man with a frost-covered beard, peered inside, his weathered face softening at the sight of the twins. "Got your hands full there, I see." "Thank you." "Yes," Charlotte replied, grateful for the assistance, as she carefully passed Emily to him, then stepped down into the snow, which immediately soaked through her thin-soled boots. The chill that shot up her legs made her gasp, but she forced a smile as she reclaimed her daughter. The stagecoach stop consisted of little more than a wooden platform adjacent to Silver Creek's main street, a single dirt thoroughfare lined with wooden buildings, a general store with peeling paint, a small church whose steeple stood straight despite the harsh winters it had endured, a saloon with rough-looking men huddled around its entrance for warmth, and at the far end, a 2-story building with a sign identifying it as Morrison's General Store and Feed Supply. Charlotte's heart leapt. Jack Morrison's business, the foundation of the security he'd promised in his letters. She scanned the small crowd that had gathered at the stagecoach's arrival, searching for the man who had described himself as 40 years of age, of average height, with brown hair graying respectably at the temples, and a demeanor befitting a businessman of standing. "Mrs. Adams." Charlotte turned, hope rising in her chest despite her exhaustion. A tall man approached, well-dressed in a wool coat that spoke of prosperity. His hair was indeed brown with silver at the temples, and his clean-shaven face might have been handsome if not for the deepening frown as his gaze moved from her face to the infants in her arms. "Mr. Morrison?" she asked, shifting Emily higher on her shoulder as the baby began to cry from the cold. "Jack Morrison?" "Yes." His voice was clipped, nothing like the warm, inviting tone she'd imagined while reading his letters. He made no move to assist her or greet her properly. Instead, he stood stiffly, his eyes now fixed on the twins with unmistakable dismay. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you," Charlotte said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the sinking feeling in her stomach. "I apologize for Emily's crying. The journey has been long and they're both cold and hungry." "You didn't mention children in your letters," Jack said flatly. "Not once." Charlotte blinked in confusion. "I most certainly did. In my second letter, I explained that I was recently widowed with infant twins. I was explicit about needing a fresh start for my small family. I received no such information." His tone suggested he believed she had deliberately deceived him. "I agreed to marry a widow, Mrs. Adams, not to take responsibility for another man's offspring." The stagecoach driver, who had been unloading her trunk, paused at the harsh words. Nearby conversations quieted as townfolk turned to observe the uncomfortable exchange. "There must be some mistake," Charlotte insisted, though doubt began to creep in. Had the letter explaining her children somehow gone astray? "I would never have undertaken such a journey without being forthright about my circumstances." Jack Morrison shook his head, taking a step backward as though to distance himself physically from the situation. "Mistake or deliberate omission, the result is the same. I have no interest in raising another man's children. I sought a wife to manage my household and present a respectable image for my business, not to inherit a ready-made family." Charlotte felt as though the ground was shifting beneath her feet. The babies, sensing her distress, both began crying in earnest. "What am I to do, then?" she asked, struggling to maintain her composure as curious onlookers gathered. "I've spent everything I had to come here." "That's hardly my concern," Morrison replied, though a flicker of discomfort crossed his face at the attention they were drawing. He lowered his voice. "There's a small hotel down the street. I'll pay for 2 nights' lodging. After that, you'll need to make other arrangements." Before Charlotte could respond, a woman pushed through the small crowd that had gathered. Middle-aged, with grey streaking her dark hair, she wore a practical dress beneath her heavy coat. She approached with concern etched on her kind face. "Everything's all right here, Jack?" she asked, though her gaze was fixed on Charlotte and the distressed twins. "A misunderstanding, Mrs. Parker," Morrison replied stiffly. "Mrs. Adams failed to mention certain complications in our correspondence." Mrs. Parker's eyes narrowed slightly at Morrison's tone, but her expression remained polite. "I see." She turned to Charlotte, her face softening. "Those little ones are near frozen, poor things. The hotel's not fit for babies. Drafty old place." She straightened her shoulders. "I'm Sarah Parker. I run the boarding house just up the street. We have a room that would suit you and the little ones better." Charlotte's eyes stung with tears she refused to shed. "Thank you, but I'm afraid I have limited funds for lodging." "We can discuss that later," Sarah said firmly. "Right now, those babies need warmth, and I'd wager you could use a hot meal yourself." Jack Morrison cleared his throat. "As I was saying, I'll cover 2 nights' lodging." "That's very generous of you, Jack," Sarah interrupted, her tone suggesting it was anything but. "I'm sure your conscience is much relieved." She turned back to Charlotte. "Come along, dear. My son can bring your trunk." Charlotte found herself following Sarah Parker away from the stagecoach stop, away from Jack Morrison and his broken promises, and toward an uncertain future in a town where she knew no one. The twins' cries had subsided to whimpers, small puffs of breath visible in the cold air. Sarah's boarding house was a large 2-story structure with a wide porch and windows glowing warmly against the gathering dusk. Inside, the entryway opened to a comfortable sitting room where a fire crackled. In the hearth, the smell of stew and fresh bread filled the air, making Charlotte's stomach clench with hunger. "Andy," Sarah called, "come help with this lady's trunk." A young man of perhaps 17 appeared from a back room, wiping his hands on a cloth. He took in the scene, Charlotte with the twins, his mother's determined expression, and nodded. "Yes, ma'am, is it still at the stage?" "Right where that fool Morrison left it," Sarah confirmed, helping Charlotte remove her coat while somehow managing to support her arm that held little Michael. After Andy departed, Sarah guided Charlotte to a rocking chair near the fire. "Now then, let me hold one of these little angels while you warm up." Too exhausted to protest, Charlotte surrendered Emily to the older woman's capable hands. Sarah cooed to the baby while expertly checking her for any signs of cold exposure. "They seem healthy, despite the journey," Sarah pronounced. "How old?" 4 months next week," Charlotte replied, relaxing incrementally in the chair's gentle motion and the room's blessed warmth. "They were born early and small, but they've grown well." Sarah nodded approvingly. "And their names?" "Emily and Michael," Charlotte's voice caught. "After my husband. He died before they were born." Understanding filled Sarah's eyes. "And so you answered Jack Morrison's advertisement?" "Yes." Charlotte didn't elaborate further. The humiliation of her reception was still too raw. Sarah's expression hardened briefly. "Morrison's a prominent businessman here, but he's always been more concerned with appearances than substance. I should have guessed his sudden interest in finding an Eastern bride had more to do with impressing his business associates than genuine companionship." The front door opened, bringing a blast of cold air as Andy returned with Charlotte's trunk. Another figure followed him inside, a tall man in a heavy coat dusted with snow, a leather satchel in hand. "Back so soon, Nathan?" Sarah asked. "I thought the Wilson boy was laid up with that fever." "His fever broke," the man replied, removing his hat to reveal dark hair threaded with silver and a face lined by time and weather, yet handsome in its strong features. His eyes, a deep green that reminded Charlotte of summer forests, moved from Sarah to Charlotte and the babies with undisguised curiosity. "Dr. Nathan Taylor," Sarah said by way of introduction. "My brother. Nathan, this is Mrs. Charlotte Adams and her twins, Emily and Michael. They've had quite the welcome to Silver Creek, I'm afraid." Dr. Taylor hung his coat on a peg by the door, approaching with a practiced eye that seemed to take in Charlotte's. Pale exhaustion and the baby's condition in one sweeping glance. "Mrs. Adams was Jack Morrison's intended," Sarah continued, her tone conveying volumes. "Was?" Dr. Taylor raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Morrison was unprepared for children," Charlotte said quietly, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. Understanding dawned in the doctor's eyes, followed by something that might have been anger, quickly masked. "I see." He moved closer, bending slightly to observe Michael in Charlotte's arms. "May I?" "Traveling can be hard on little ones." Charlotte nodded, allowing the doctor to examine her son with gentle, competent hands. His touch was professional, yet somehow comforting, as he checked the baby's lungs, temperature, and reflexes. "Healthy little fellow," he pronounced, then repeated, "The examination with Emily, who had calmed in Sarah's arms. Both seem no worse for the journey, though I'd recommend plenty of warmth, rest, and regular feeding to help them recover." "Thank you, Doctor," Charlotte said, relaxing slightly at his assessment. "Nathan delivered half the children in this territory," Sarah said with obvious pride, "including my Andy, though that was some time ago." Dr. Taylor smiled briefly at this, the expression transforming his serious face into something unexpectedly warm. "Sarah exaggerates, though I will say these two are fine specimens considering their journey. You must have taken excellent care of them under difficult circumstances, Mrs. Adams." The simple acknowledgement of her efforts, something no one had offered since she'd been widowed, brought a fresh wave of emotion that Charlotte struggled to contain. She blinked rapidly, focusing on Michael's tiny fingers wrapped around her own. "Now then," Sarah said briskly, perhaps sensing Charlotte's fragile composure, "Andy, take Mrs. Adams's trunk up to the blue room. Nathan, you'll stay for supper." "I hadn't planned to," the doctor began, then glanced at Charlotte again. Something in her expression, or perhaps the twins' presence, seemed to change his mind. "But I suppose my other patients can wait a bit longer." As Andy carried her trunk upstairs and Sarah disappeared to the kitchen with Emily still contentedly cradled in her arms, Charlotte found herself alone with Dr. Taylor. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but heavy with unasked questions. "I apologize for intruding on your family's hospitality," Charlotte finally said. "Once I've rested, I'll make arrangements to move on." Dr. Taylor studied her with those perceptive green eyes. "Move on to where, Mrs. Adams?" The simple question laid bare the precariousness of her situation. Charlotte had no answer that didn't reveal the complete desperation of her circumstances. Before she could formulate a response that preserved some dignity, Michael began to fuss, his small face scrunching in hunger. "May I hold him while you prepare whatever he needs?" Dr. Taylor offered, extending his hands with a confidence that spoke of experience. Surprised, Charlotte handed Michael to him. Most men she'd known, including her late husband, had been hesitant with infants, especially fussy ones. But Dr. Taylor held Michael with practiced ease, speaking to him in low, soothing tones, while Charlotte retrieved a prepared bottle from her travel bag. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "You seem comfortable with babies," she observed as she tested the milk's temperature on her wrist. A shadow passed over his face. "I had a son and a daughter." He offered no further explanation, but the past tense told Charlotte all she needed to know. "I'm so sorry," she said simply, understanding the magnitude of such loss. He nodded once in acknowledgement, then watched as she fed Michael. "Silver Creek needs families, Mrs. Adams. The Montana Territory is hard on those who face it alone." "As I'm discovering," Charlotte replied with a wry smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Perhaps Jack Morrison's short-sightedness might prove fortunate for someone else in our community," Dr. Taylor said carefully. "Someone who understands the value of what he so carelessly rejected." Before Charlotte could interpret this cryptic statement, Sarah returned with Emily, who was now happily gumming a wooden teething ring. "Supper's nearly ready," she announced. "I've had Andy prepare warm water for a bath for the little ones afterward. Nothing improves a trying day like clean babies and a full stomach." As Charlotte followed Sarah to the dining room, she felt Dr. Taylor's gaze follow her. For the first time since arriving in Silver Creek, a fragile tendril of hope unfurled in her chest. Perhaps, just perhaps, this wasn't the end of her journey, but rather an unexpected detour on the path to the home she sought. Then suddenly, as she took her seat at the table, a strange expression crossed Dr. Taylor's face. He was staring at her intently, as if seeing her for the first time. Charlotte Wilson," he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Charlotte froze, the name from her past striking her like a physical blow. No one had called her by her maiden name in years. "Yes," she replied cautiously, "before I married. How did you—" "Springfield Academy. You were 2 years below me. Your father was the mathematics professor." His eyes had softened with recognition. "You probably don't remember me. I was the gangly scholarship student who worked in the campus infirmary." The memories flooded back. A tall, serious boy who'd once bandaged her wrist after she'd fallen from a horse during a school outing. A boy she'd secretly admired from afar, who'd left to attend medical school before she could gather the courage to speak to him properly. "Nathan Taylor," she whispered. "You went to Harvard Medical School." He nodded, a smile transforming his face. "And you were going to teach music." Sarah looked between them, astonishment clear in her expression. "You two know each other?" "We did, once," Nathan said, his eyes never leaving Charlotte's face. "A lifetime ago." The twins, oblivious to this revelation, continued their contented babbling. But something had shifted in the atmosphere of the room. A connection rediscovered, a past resurfacing in the most unexpected place, at the most unexpected time. And suddenly, Silver Creek didn't feel quite so foreign anymore. Morning light filtered through lace curtains, casting delicate patterns across the blue wallpaper of the boarding house room. Charlotte woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the twins' soft breathing beside her brought reality rushing back. The events of yesterday, the humiliating rejection, Sarah Parker's kindness, and the unexpected reunion with Nathan Taylor all settled over her like the patchwork quilt covering her bed. The twins still slept, exhausted from their journey. Charlotte slipped quietly from bed, washing her face in the porcelain basin and changing into her second-best dress, a faded blue cotton that had once been quite fine. Her reflection in the small mirror revealed dark circles beneath her eyes. Despite her night's rest, she pinched her cheeks for color and smoothed her honey-brown hair into a simple bun, desperate to present a composed image that belied her inner turmoil. A soft knock at the door interrupted her preparations. Sarah Parker entered, carrying a tray with steaming coffee, fresh bread, and preserves. "Thought you might prefer breakfast up here this morning," she said, setting the tray on a small table. "Those little ones still sleeping?" Charlotte nodded gratefully. "They rarely sleep this long. The journey must have exhausted them. Travel's hard on the smallest ones," Sarah agreed, pouring coffee into a delicate cup. "I've prepared bottles for when they wake. My Andy found your formula supplies in your trunk. Hope you don't mind." "Of course not. Thank you for your kindness, Mrs. Parker. Sarah, please." She sat in the chair opposite Charlotte. "So, Springfield Academy, you and Nathan." Charlotte's cheeks warmed. "We barely knew each other. He was an upperclassman when I was just a girl." Yet he remembered you instantly. Sarah's eyes twinkled with interest. "That's not nothing." "It was a small school," Charlotte deflected, sipping her coffee. "And being the professor's daughter made me somewhat visible." Sarah seemed unconvinced, but didn't press further. "Nathan was up half the night, pacing. Said he needed to think. That man thinks too much, if you ask me." Charlotte hesitated, then voiced the question that had plagued her through the night. "He mentioned he had children, in the past tense." Sarah's expression sobered. "His wife Caroline and their children William and Grace died in a fever epidemic 3 winters ago. Nathan was 30 miles away, tending miners after a tunnel collapse. By the time he returned—" She left the sentence unfinished, the conclusion evident. "How terrible," Charlotte whispered, understanding now the shadows she'd glimpsed in his eyes. "It nearly destroyed him," Sarah acknowledged. "He sold their homestead, couldn't bear to live there with the memories, and moved into rooms above. His practice in town, threw himself into his work. This is the first time I've seen a spark of his old self since that day." Before Charlotte could respond, Emily began to stir, her soft whimpers quickly escalating to hungry cries. Michael followed almost immediately, as if unwilling to let his sister command attention alone. As Charlotte tended to the twins, Sarah watched with approval. "You handled them beautifully. Not every young mother manages twins with such grace." "Necessity is an excellent teacher," Charlotte replied, settling back with Emily at her breast, while Michael waited his turn, temporarily distracted by a silver rattle Sarah had produced from her pocket. "Speaking of necessity," Sarah continued, her tone becoming practical, "we should discuss your situation. Jack Morrison has certainly created a predicament, but Silver Creek might still offer opportunities for you and these little ones." "I have some savings," Charlotte said, though the small leather pouch in her trunk contained barely enough for a week's lodging and return train fare to the nearest large town. "Perhaps there's a stagecoach leaving in a few days that could take us to Helena. I might find work there." "Helena's no place for a woman alone with infant twins." Sarah shook her head firmly. "Rough mining town with little patience for children's needs." "I was a music teacher before I married," Charlotte offered. "Perhaps there are families here who would value lessons for their children." "Perhaps," Sarah acknowledged, "though fewer than you might hope at this season. Most ranching families focus on survival during winter months. Extras like music lessons wait for spring prosperity." Charlotte's heart sank as the practical challenges of her situation became increasingly apparent. Even if she found modest employment, accommodations that allowed for the twins would be difficult to secure. The alternative, returning east in defeat, seemed equally impossible given her depleted resources and the absence of family support in Boston. "There is another possibility," Sarah said carefully, eyeing Charlotte with consideration. "Nathan mentioned it this morning before he left for his rounds." "Dr. Taylor has been more than kind already," Charlotte demurred, uncomfortable with the thought of accepting further charity. "Not charity," Sarah corrected, seeming to read her thoughts. "A proposition of mutual benefit." Charlotte stiffened slightly. "I'm not sure I understand." "Nothing improper," Sarah assured her quickly. "Nathan's practice has grown beyond his ability to manage alone. He needs help, someone to maintain records, prepare basic remedies, and assist with patients when appropriate. Your educational background suggests you have the necessary skills." "He's offering me employment?" Charlotte asked, surprise evident in her voice. "With accommodations," Sarah confirmed. "His home adjoins his office and has room to spare. The previous doctor built it for a large family decades ago." "That's unexpectedly generous," Charlotte said cautiously. "But I must ask, would the arrangement accommodate my children? They require considerable attention." Nathan specifically mentioned the twins would be welcome, Sarah replied. "In fact, he suggested their presence might be an advantage. Many of his patients are mothers with young children who might feel more comfortable seeing your babies thriving under the same roof where they seek treatment." The offer seemed almost too perfect, raising Charlotte's suspicions. "Forgive my directness, but why would Dr. Taylor extend such an opportunity to someone he barely remembers from years ago?" Sarah considered her answer carefully. "Nathan is a practical man. Qualified help is scarce in Silver Creek. You're educated, obviously capable, and in need of a situation that accommodates your children. Your needs align with his." She paused, then added, "And perhaps seeing a familiar face from before his losses has awakened something he's kept dormant for too long." It was a practical explanation, yet Charlotte sensed something unspoken beneath it. Still, she couldn't deny the position solved her most pressing concerns: shelter, income, and the ability to care for her children while working. "I would need to consider this offer carefully," she said finally. "Perhaps visit his home and office to better understand the duties involved." "Of course," Sarah agreed immediately. "Nathan suggested this afternoon, if that suits. He returns for a midday meal around noon." As Sarah departed to attend to other boarders, Charlotte found herself facing a decision she hadn't anticipated when she'd boarded the stagecoach in Helena. Rather than becoming Jack Morrison's wife, she was considering becoming Nathan Taylor's employee, a startling shift from dependent spouse to self-supporting woman. The morning passed quickly as Charlotte cared for the twins, repacked her meager belongings, and considered her limited options. By the time noon approached, she had prepared herself to at least explore Dr. Taylor's offer before making any decisions about their future. Sarah offered to watch the twins while Charlotte visited Dr. Taylor's practice. "They'll be fine with me," she assured Charlotte, "and you'll think more clearly without them, for an hour or two." Charlotte hadn't been separated from her babies since their birth, and the prospect both worried and relieved her. Worry won briefly, until Sarah demonstrated her obvious competence with infants, settling both twins in a cradle she'd had Andy bring down from the attic. "My sister-in-law, Nathan's wife, had her babies in this," Sarah explained softly as she gently rocked the cradle. "It's good to see it used again." This reference to the doctor's family stirred Charlotte's curiosity further, but she refrained from prying. Instead, she thanked Sarah and set out for the doctor's office located on Silver Creek's main street, just past the church. The building was larger than Charlotte expected, a well-maintained two-story structure with Dr. Nathan Taylor, physician and surgeon, painted on a wooden sign above the door. A separate entrance at the side presumably led to the adjoining residence. The waiting room was empty when Charlotte entered, but a young woman looked up from a desk near a doorway that likely led to examination rooms. "Mrs. Adams?" the woman asked, rising. "I'm Maggie Brooks, Dr. Taylor's nurse. He's just finishing with his last patient before midday and asked me to make you comfortable." She gestured to a chair. "May I offer coffee while you wait?" "No, thank you," Charlotte replied, taking the offered seat and studying the waiting room. It was clean and orderly, with simple but comfortable furnishings. Medical texts lined bookshelves along one wall, while framed anatomical illustrations hung on another. Everything spoke of competence and care. Maggie returned to her desk, organizing patient files with practiced efficiency. "Dr. Taylor mentioned you might be joining our practice," she said conversationally. "We've needed help since Mrs. Winters left to care for her ailing father in St. Louis." "He's offered a position," Charlotte clarified, "though I haven't accepted yet. I know little about medical practice," Maggie smiled reassuringly. "Most of the work involves organization and common sense. Medical knowledge comes with time." She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. "Between us, it would be a relief to have another woman here. I'm only part-time since my husband farms, and some female patients prefer women present during examinations." Before Charlotte could respond, a door opened, and Nathan appeared with an elderly man who was thanking him profusely for something. After seeing his patient out, the doctor turned to Charlotte. "Mrs. Adams," he greeted her, his formal tone belied by the warmth in his eyes. "Thank you for coming. I hope Maggie has made you welcome." "Very much so," Charlotte assured him, rising. "Good. I thought we might start with a tour of the office, then the residence, if that suits you." The tour was thorough and informative. The medical office consisted of 2 examination rooms, a small surgery, a dispensary for medicines, and a private consultation room. Nathan explained the filing system, inventory procedures for medical supplies, and the basic duties that would fall to Charlotte if she accepted the position. "I don't expect medical knowledge initially," he assured her. "That can be learned. What I need most is organization, attention to detail, and discretion. Patient confidentiality is sacred." "I understand," Charlotte said. Impressed by the systematic way he ran his practice, he led her through a door at the back of the office into a covered walkway connecting to the residence. The house was surprisingly large and well-appointed, clearly designed for a family much larger than a single man. A spacious kitchen with modern conveniences, a formal dining room, a comfortable parlor with well-stocked bookshelves, and upstairs 4 bedrooms, including a nursery still furnished with a crib and small bed. Nathan paused in the doorway of this room, his expression unreadable. "This would be suitable for your twins as they grow," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "It has southern exposure, warm. In winter, catches the breeze in summer." Charlotte walked to the window, noting the view of a small garden, now dormant under snow. The nursery was cheerful despite its disuse, with faded circus animals painted along one wall and colorful quilts folded neatly at the foot of the small bed. This had been a room created with love, she realized, not merely furnished, but designed. To delight its occupants, it's perfect, she said softly, then turned to face him directly. "Dr. Taylor, may I ask a personal question?" He seemed to brace himself, but nodded. "Your sister mentioned your family." She hesitated, unsure how to continue without causing pain. "You're wondering about William and Grace," he finished for her. It's a natural question, given I'm offering you residence in a home clearly built for children. He drew a deep breath. William was 5, and Grace had just turned 3 when the fever took them. Caroline had already been ill for days, nursing them. By the time my message reached me at the mining camp, it was too late for any of them. He moved to the window, gazing out at the snow-covered garden. For 2 years, I maintained this house exactly as they left it. Recently, I've come to realize Caroline would have hated seeing rooms meant for living left unused out of grief. Charlotte nodded, moved by his honesty. It's a beautiful home. Your wife had excellent taste. She did, he agreed with the ghost, of a smile and a practical nature that would approve of its use by someone who needs it. He gestured toward the stairs. There's more to see if you wish, or we can discuss terms if you've seen enough. I believe I've seen what I need to, Charlotte replied. The position seems well suited to my situation, and the accommodation is more than generous. She paused, wanting to be completely transparent. I should mention that while I'm a quick learner, my experience with medical matters is limited to basic first aid and caring for my children through minor illnesses. As I said, medical knowledge can be acquired, Nathan assured her. Maggie will assist with patient care until you're comfortable taking on those duties. Initially, I need someone to manage the office, prepare simple tinctures and remedies from established formulas, and maintain order in both house and practice. They proceeded to discuss specifics, hours, compensation, duties, and when Charlotte might begin. The terms were more than fair, offering security she hadn't dared hope for, just 24 hours earlier. Yet beneath her gratitude lay an unsettling question. Was she accepting this position because it truly suited her, or because desperate circumstances left her no choice? As if sensing her internal conflict, Nathan said quietly, "Take until tomorrow to consider, Mrs. Adams. This decision affects not only you, but your children. I wouldn't rush you into something of such consequence." His consideration touched her. How different from Jack Morrison's cold dismissal was this man's thoughtful respect for her autonomy, even knowing her precarious situation. "Thank you, Doctor. I shall give you my answer tomorrow." Charlotte extended her hand, which he took briefly in a formal handshake. "Regardless of my decision, your kindness has been unexpected." His eyes held hers for a moment. "Sometimes the journey we plan takes an unexpected turn, Charlotte. In my experience, those detours often lead exactly where we need to go, though we couldn't have known it when we set out." The use of her given name, casual, perhaps unintended, created an immediate sense of connection that transcended their brief acquaintance at Springfield. This was not the awkward boy she'd admired from afar, but a man tempered by achievement and loss, offering not romance, but respect and partnership. "You remember more of Springfield than I would have expected," she ventured, a slight flush colored his tanned features. "I remember the professor's daughter, who played piano at Sunday gatherings, who helped younger students with their compositions when they struggled, who once defended a kitchen maid accused of stealing when no one else would speak up." Charlotte felt warmth spread through her cheeks. "I didn't think anyone noticed those things." "I noticed," he said simply, as she walked back to the boarding. A house through the crisp afternoon air. His words echoed in her mind. Her carefully planned future with Jack Morrison had crumbled upon arrival, yet within 24 hours, another path had opened, one that offered independence rather than subservience, partnership rather than patronage. Sarah was waiting anxiously when Charlotte returned, the twins happily playing on a blanket near the hearth. "Well," she demanded without preamble, "what did you think?" "The position is more than I could have hoped for," Charlotte admitted, removing her coat and kneeling to greet her babies. "And the accommodations are perfect for us." "But?" Sarah prompted, sensing her hesitation. Charlotte gathered Michael into her arms, inhaling his sweet baby scent. It feels like accepting charity, even though the work is real. Nathan Taylor doesn't offer charity, Sarah stated firmly. If he's offered you a position, it's because he needs the help and believes you can provide it. Perhaps, Charlotte conceded, but there's also our past connection, slight as it was, which means he has some measure of your character beyond a single meeting, Sarah pointed out pragmatically. In a territory where strangers can be dangerous, that's no small thing. Charlotte bounced Michael gently as he babbled against her shoulder. And what of town gossip? A young widow living in a bachelor's home, even with separate quarters. Sarah waved this concern away. Frontier towns run on practicality more than propriety. Besides, Nathan's reputation is beyond reproach. No one who matters would question his motives or your character. As evening approached, other boarders returned from their day's activities, filling the house with conversation and the comforting sounds of a shared meal being prepared. Charlotte helped where she could, grateful for the companionship after months of lonely struggling in Boston. During supper, Andy Parker regaled her with stories of Silver Creek's history, how it had grown from a simple trading post to a thriving community serving ranchers and farmers throughout the valley. Several boarders offered advice about winter survival in Montana Territory, from the proper layering of clothing to which wild plants could supplement dwindling winter stores. "The Parkers will see you right," assured Mr. Hensley, an elderly surveyor, who had lived at the boarding house for over a decade. "Best people in the territory. And Dr. Taylor's no slouch either. Saved my leg when everyone else said to amputate after that mining accident in '72. By the time Charlotte retired to her room, her mind was made up. The position with Dr. Taylor offered the best hope for her, children's future, and her own independence. The connection to her past, unexpected as it was, provided a foundation of trust that would have taken months to build with a complete stranger. As she nursed the twins to sleep, Charlotte found herself humming a melody she hadn't thought of in years. A composition she'd played at Springfield Sunday gatherings, where a serious medical student had apparently noticed more than she'd ever realized. The thought brought a smile to her lips as she drifted toward sleep, anticipating tomorrow's new beginning in this unexpected place. Morning found Charlotte at Dr. Taylor's office door precisely at 8 o'clock, twins bundled against the cold, her decision firm. Nathan greeted her with barely concealed anticipation in his eyes. "I accept your offer," she said simply. "When would you like us to begin?" His smile transformed his serious features. "Today, if possible. I have several patients this morning who would benefit from a woman's presence." And with those words, Charlotte Adams stepped across the threshold into a new life, one that neither she nor Nathan could have foreseen when he'd placed that advertisement for a mail-order bride, or when she'd boarded the stagecoach with her. Twins and a heart full of desperate hope. Sometimes the destination finds us even when our carefully charted courses go awry. Charlotte's first week at Dr. Taylor's practice passed in a blur of new routines and adjustments. By Friday evening, she and the twins were comfortably settled in the doctor's residence, occupying rooms unused since tragedy had emptied them 3 years prior. The early February weather remained stubbornly cold, but inside Nathan's home, warmth prevailed. Charlotte established a nursery in the cheerful room with circus animals painted on the walls, arranging the twins' meager belongings alongside the toys and furnishings that had belonged to William and Grace Taylor. She had offered to store these mementos, but Nathan had shaken his head. "They were meant to be used," he'd said simply. "Let them serve their purpose again." On this particular morning, Charlotte rose before dawn, as had become her habit. The twins still slept, their schedule gradually adjusting to the rhythms of the household. She dressed quickly in the practical navy skirt and white shirtwaist that had become her work uniform, then padded downstairs to prepare breakfast before the day's appointments began. She found Nathan already in the kitchen, coffee brewing on the stove. He wore a crisp white shirt, his suit jacket and tie still hanging on the hook by the back door. "You're up early," she observed, reaching for the flour canister. She had discovered the doctor preferred biscuits to toast, a preference she was happy to accommodate, given his generosity. "Couldn't sleep," he replied, pouring coffee into 2 cups and setting one on the table for her. "The Carson Ranch sent word late last night. Martha's time is near. First baby." He sipped his coffee, watching as Charlotte efficiently mixed biscuit dough. "I thought I might ride out this morning to check on her." Charlotte nodded, cutting butter into the flour with practiced movements. "Will you be gone all day?" "Depends on her progress. First babies often take their time." He hesitated. "I've asked Maggie to come in, but she can only stay until noon. Her husband needs her help with a sick horse." "I'll manage the office," Charlotte assured him, shaping the dough into rounds and placing them on a baking sheet. She had quickly mastered the filing system and basic office procedures, though she remained hesitant about medical matters. "Should I reschedule the afternoon appointments?" Nathan considered this. "Only Mrs. Harmon, for her monthly tonic for nerves. Nothing urgent. The others are mostly dressing changes and follow-ups I'd rather not postpone." Charlotte slid the biscuits into the oven, then joined him at the table, warming her hands around the coffee cup. "I'll need instructions for the dressing changes. Simple ones only. I've noted the procedures in each patient file." His confidence in her abilities warmed her more than the coffee. "You've learned quickly these past weeks." "I've had an excellent teacher," she replied, then blushed slightly at his appreciative smile. Their morning routine had developed an easy familiarity that still surprised Charlotte. Nathan breakfasted with her, then checked on the twins when they woke while she prepared bottles. He never seemed to mind the disruption they brought to his orderly bachelor existence. On the contrary, he often found excuses to interact with them, examining their developing skills with a doctor's eye, but also with genuine interest. This morning followed the pattern until a knock at the back door signaled the arrival of Andy Parker, who had come to drive the doctor to the Carson Ranch. "I'll likely return by supper," Nathan told Charlotte as he gathered his medical bag and heavy coat. "Send word with Andy if any emergencies arise." After his departure, Charlotte settled into the day's tasks. The twins cooperated by napping longer than usual, allowing her to organize patient files and prepare the examination rooms before Maggie Brooks arrived to assist with morning appointments. "You're a natural at this," Maggie commented as they worked. The older woman had initially seemed wary of Charlotte, perhaps concerned about being replaced, but had warmed considerably upon realizing Charlotte had no desire to usurp her position. "Most take months to learn what you've mastered in weeks." "Teaching requires organization," Charlotte replied, labeling newly prepared tinctures of willow bark for fever and chamomile for digestive complaints. "And raising twins demands efficiency," Maggie laughed, checking the supply of clean bandages. "True enough. Speaking of the little ones, they're thriving here. Some whispered you might not manage both work and motherhood, but you've proven them." "Wrong," Charlotte stiffened slightly. "Some meaning Jack Morrison, I presume." Maggie had the grace to look embarrassed. "Gossip travels in small towns." Jack Morrison was quite vocal about his disappointment, Charlotte said dryly. She had encountered Silver Creek's prominent storekeeper only once since her arrival, at Sunday services, where he had pointedly avoided introducing her to the church's social circle. The rejection had stung, though Charlotte pretended indifference. "Pay him no mind," Maggie advised. "The Morrisons fancy themselves Silver Creek royalty, since their family founded the trading post 30 years ago. But Dr. Taylor has more respect in this town than all the Morrisons combined." The morning passed with a steady stream of patients. A rancher with a deep cut from mending fences, a child with an ear infection, an expectant mother seeking reassurance about her advancing pregnancy. Maggie handled most medical aspects while Charlotte managed records, payments, and dispensing prescribed remedies. At noon, Maggie departed regretfully. "I'd stay if I could, but Thomas is hopeless with sick animals. If I don't help, we'll lose a valuable draft horse." "We'll manage," Charlotte assured her, though uncertainty gnawed at her confidence as the afternoon patients began arriving. The first two appointments proceeded smoothly, both simple dressing changes that followed Nathan's detailed instructions. Exactly. Charlotte was just beginning to relax when the bell above the office door jangled and Jack Morrison himself entered, supporting an ashen-faced young man whose right hand was wrapped in a blood-soaked cloth. "My clerk," Morrison announced without preamble, "sliced his palm open in crates. Where's Taylor?" Charlotte straightened, refusing to be intimidated by the man who had so publicly humiliated her. "Dr. Taylor is attending a birth at the Carson Ranch. I can help or send for him if necessary." Morrison's expression darkened with recognition as he properly looked at her for the first time. "You, what are you doing here?" "Mrs. Adams is my assistant," came a deep voice from behind them. Nathan stood in the doorway, his coat dusted with snow, medical bag in hand, and fully qualified to assess whether a situation requires my immediate attention. Relief flooded Charlotte, followed quickly by concern. "The Carson baby?" "Delivered safely an hour ago. Mother and daughter are doing well." His gaze shifted to the injured clerk. "Let's examine that hand." Morrison withdrew as Nathan took charge, leading the young man to an examination room. Charlotte followed with clean bandages and instruments, leaving the merchant standing awkwardly in the waiting area. The injury proved serious, but not life-threatening. A deep laceration requiring several stitches, but no damage to tendons or nerves. Charlotte assisted competently, handing instruments, preparing suture materials, and cleaning the wound as directed. The clerk, whose name was Peter Jenkins, remained stoic throughout the procedure, thanking them profusely once his hand was neatly bandaged. "You'll need to rest that hand for at least 3 days, Nathan instructed. "No lifting, no writing, minimal movement. Mrs. Adams will prepare a tincture for pain." As Charlotte mixed the prescribed remedy, she overheard Morrison's protests in the waiting room. "3 days without my clerk? Impossible. The spring inventory arrives tomorrow." "Infection is a greater threat than delayed inventory," Nathan replied, firmly. "Unless you prefer to risk losing him permanently to blood poisoning." Charlotte handed the tincture to young Jenkins, along with written instructions. 2 drops in water every 4 hours as needed for pain, she explained. "Return in 3 days for Dr. Taylor to examine the wound, sooner if you notice increased redness, swelling, or fever." After the clerk departed, Morrison lingered, his discomfort evident as he shifted his weight from foot to foot. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Mrs. Adams, I owe you an apology." Charlotte froze in the act of recording the treatment in the patient ledger. Of all the things she had expected from Jack Morrison, an apology ranked least likely. "My behavior upon your arrival was ungentlemanly," he continued stiffly. "I've since learned that your letter explaining the children's existence did indeed arrive, but was misplaced by my sister during a bout of influenza. She found it last week among papers she had set aside while ill." Charlotte set down her pen carefully. "I see. Had I known about the twins from the beginning, I might have—" He stopped, perhaps realizing no version of that sentence improved his standing. "You might have what, Mr. Morrison?" Charlotte's voice remained steady, despite the anger simmering beneath her composed exterior. "Rejected me by letter, instead of in person. Saved us both the embarrassment of a public scene." Morrison flushed. "I merely meant, I believe Mrs. Adams understands your meaning perfectly," Nathan interrupted, his tone deceptively mild, though Charlotte noted the tension in his jaw. "Your apology is noted. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have other patients waiting." No other patients waited, in fact, but Morrison didn't challenge the claim. With a stiff nod, he departed, the bell jangling discordantly in his wake. Silence stretched between them until Charlotte spoke. "Thank you for your timely return, Doctor." "Fortuitous timing," he agreed, removing his coat, "though from what I observed you were handling Morrison quite capably on your own." "Morrison doesn't concern me," Charlotte replied, returning to her record-keeping, "though I admit I was relieved to have your expertise for his clerk's injury. A deep laceration requires more skill than I currently possess." Nathan studied her for a moment, then made a decision. "Perhaps it's time to expand your medical training beyond basic procedures. You've mastered the administrative aspects more quickly than I anticipated." Charlotte looked up in surprise. "Would you teach me more advanced skills?" "If you're willing to learn," he replied. "Your steady hands and attention to detail would serve you well in medical practice, and having another trained person in Silver Creek would benefit the community, especially when I'm called away on distant cases." The offer stirred something in Charlotte that had lain dormant since before her marriage: intellectual curiosity, the satisfaction of mastering new knowledge. "I would be honored to learn whatever you're willing to teach," she said sincerely. His expression warmed. "We'll begin tomorrow then. Basic anatomy first, then common ailments and treatments." He glanced at the clock on the wall. "For now, I believe it's time to check on your children. They've been remarkably quiet all afternoon." Together, they walked through the connecting passage to the residence, finding both babies awake, but contentedly babbling to each other in their crib. The sight of the normally active twins, peacefully entertaining themselves, brought a smile to Charlotte's face. "They're becoming more aware of each other," Nathan observed. "An advantage of twins, built-in companionship, and double the mischief once they become mobile," Charlotte added, lifting Emily, who immediately reached for the doctor's watch chain. A favorite fascination. He chuckled, not minding the small fingers grasping the gold links. "I suspect these two will keep us both on our toes in the coming months." The casual "us" sent an unexpected warmth through Charlotte. In the weeks since accepting the position, Nathan had gradually shifted from formal employer to something approaching a friend. He respected her intelligence, valued her contributions to his practice, and most surprisingly, showed genuine interest in her children's development. The remainder of the afternoon passed pleasantly as Charlotte prepared supper, while Nathan entertained the twins in the kitchen. He had fashioned a safe enclosure from a large wooden box lined with blankets, allowing them freedom to practice sitting up while containing their increasing attempts at mobility. "William used to escape every containment we devised," he remarked, helping Michael maintain his precarious balance. By 9 months, he could scale barriers twice his height. Charlotte noted how naturally he now shared memories of his children, a stark change from the guarded silence of her first weeks. "Michael shows similar determination," she replied. "Emily is more cautious, but equally persistent in her own way." "Different temperaments from the beginning," Nathan nodded. "Grace was our thinker, observed everything carefully before attempting anything new. William leaped first and considered consequences later, if at all." Charlotte smiled, stirring the beef stew, simmering on the stove. "My brother Robert was the same, always rushing headlong into adventure. I was forever patching his scrapes and bruises." "Your first medical experience," he teased, a glint in his eyes. "I suppose it was," she laughed. Though Rob was a reluctant, patient at best. Their conversation continued through supper, comfortable and unforced. Charlotte described her childhood in Massachusetts, her years teaching music at a small school in Boston, her brief marriage to Samuel Adams. Nathan shared stories of his medical training at Harvard, his decision to practice in Montana Territory, rather than Boston, his courtship of Caroline Taylor, who had followed him west despite her wealthy family's objections. "She never regretted it," he said, a bittersweet smile crossing his features. "Even during the harshest winters, the loneliest times when I was called away for days to remote homesteads, she maintained that our life here had meaning her Boston existence lacked." "She sounds remarkable," Charlotte said gently. She was. He gazed into the fire for a long moment, then visibly returned to the present. "As are you, Mrs. Adams. Few women would have shown resilience in the face of Morrison's rejection, let alone built a new life so quickly." "Necessity is a powerful motivator," Charlotte replied, "and I had help." She hesitated, then added softly, "Your kindness made all the difference." Their eyes met across the table, something unspoken passing between them. The moment lingered until Emily broke it with a demanding cry for attention. As Charlotte tended to the twins' bedtime routine later that evening, her thoughts returned to that moment and the gradual transformation of her circumstances. 1 month ago, she had departed Boston with little hope beyond securing basic survival for her children. She had arrived in Silver Creek to rejection and seeming disaster. Yet somehow she now found herself in a comfortable home with meaningful work, learning new skills under the guidance of a man who respected her intelligence and accepted, even welcomed, her children. Was this merely fortunate coincidence, she wondered, or something more deliberate? The question followed her into dreams, where Nathan Taylor's green eyes held promises she dared not interpret while awake. Morning brought a fresh perspective and new developments. Charlotte descended to the kitchen to find Nathan already dressed for the day, a letter opened before him at the breakfast table. "News?" she inquired, moving to prepare coffee. "From the Territorial Medical Board," he confirmed. "They're sending an inspector next month to evaluate rural practices. Standard procedure, but it means additional preparation." Charlotte nodded, mentally calculating what records would need organizing. "We'll be ready." "Ancient history," Sarah waved dismissively, "but Margaret harbors grudges like others, collect china figurines. Your presence here, young, intelligent, clearly valued by Nathan, has rekindled her resentment." "Dr. Taylor and I maintain a strictly professional relationship," Charlotte felt compelled to clarify, though a warmth spread across her cheeks that suggested complexity beneath the statement. Ruth and Maggie exchanged knowing glances that Charlotte pretended not to notice. "Professional or not," Maggie said practically, "you've revitalized this practice. Patients who previously avoided medical care now come regularly, especially women and mothers with young children." "And Nathan smiles again," Sarah added softly. "That alone would earn you the undying enmity of Margaret Morrison, who spent 3 years offering comfort to the grieving widower without receiving so much as a second glance." This new understanding of the morning's confrontation left Charlotte unsettled throughout the afternoon. As she assisted patients, recorded treatments, and managed the increasingly busy office, her mind returned repeatedly to Sarah's casual mention of Nathan smiling again, and the implication that she was somehow responsible. Did others in town share Margaret Morrison's suspicions about her relationship with the doctor? The thought troubled her. Charlotte had built a new life centered on independence and professional respect, far removed from her original purpose in coming to Silver Creek. The last thing she wanted was speculation that undermined her hard-won position or complicated her working relationship with Nathan Taylor. Yet she couldn't deny that their relationship had evolved beyond employer and employee. Their evenings often extended long after the twins were asleep, sharing medical texts or discussing interesting cases. He treated her more as colleague than servant, valuing her observations and encouraging her growing knowledge. And sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, she caught expressions on his face that stirred feelings she'd believed buried with her husband. Nathan returned mid-afternoon, removing his coat and hat as he entered through the private entrance connecting. The house to the office. Charlotte was examining a young child's rash, one of the minor ailments she now handled independently, but felt immediately aware of his presence in a way that confirmed her earlier concerns. "Mrs. Adams," he greeted her, his voice warming the professional address. "Anything requiring my attention?" "Several messages," she replied, completing her examination. "And Mrs. Brooks and Sarah brought lunch. There's plenty left if you're hungry." Once the young patient departed with salve for the rash and instructions for care, Charlotte briefed Nathan on the morning's appointments and messages. She hesitated before mentioning the delegation's visit, unsure how to frame their concerns without creating awkwardness. He noticed her hesitation immediately. Something else happened. "What is it?" "The Ladies' Aid Society sent representatives," Charlotte admitted. "Mrs. Morrison, Mrs. Campbell, and Mrs. Wilson expressed concerns about the propriety of our working arrangement." His expression darkened. "Margaret Morrison's doing, no doubt. What precisely were these concerns?" Charlotte smoothed her apron unnecessarily. "That a woman shouldn't practice medicine. That my living here sets a poor example. That our arrangement appears improper." "I see." His jaw tightened. "And your response?" "I explained that my position is professional and recognized by territorial statute." Sarah and Maggie arrived fortuitously and offered additional perspective. Charlotte managed a small smile. "I believe the delegation retreated in strategic disorder." Nathan's tension visibly eased. "Sarah can be formidable when defending those she cares about." "She mentioned something interesting," Charlotte ventured, curiosity overcoming caution, "that Mrs. Morrison once had expectations regarding you." He looked genuinely surprised. Then understanding dawned. "Ah. Ancient history from before I met Caroline. Margaret's father suggested an arrangement between our families that never progressed beyond preliminary discussions." "I see," Charlotte replied, relieved by his dismissive tone, yet still troubled. "Nevertheless, I wouldn't want gossip to damage your standing in the community or the practice's reputation." Nathan studied her for a long moment. "Are you concerned about your own reputation, Charlotte, or mine?" "Both," she admitted. "I've worked hard to establish myself here. You've given me opportunities I never imagined possible. I wouldn't want misperceptions to jeopardize either." His expression softened. "Charlotte," he said, using her given name with the ease that had developed between them over recent weeks. "Frontier communities run on practical realities, not social niceties. Your work here speaks for itself. Anyone truly concerned about community welfare recognizes the value you bring to this practice." "Perhaps," she conceded, "but perception often overshadows reality, especially where women's reputations are concerned." "Then we address it directly," he decided, his tone turning brisk. "I've been invited to speak at this Sunday's church service about spring health precautions. I'll use the opportunity to formally introduce you as my registered medical apprentice. Public acknowledgement should quell the worst of the gossip." The solution was practical and sensible, exactly what she would expect from him. Charlotte nodded. Agreement, pushing aside the complicated feelings their conversation had stirred. Sunday arrived clear and unseasonably warm, drawing nearly the entire settlement to the white-clapboard church at the end of Main Street. Charlotte sat beside Sarah in a pew near the front, the twins clean and presentable in their best clothes, though Michael fussed against the confinement of the formal setting. Reverend Thomas delivered a brief sermon on renewal and growth before introducing Nathan to speak on seasonal health matters. Charlotte listened attentively as he discussed precautions against spring illnesses, proper nutrition after winter's limited diet, and the importance of cleaning water sources contaminated by snowmelt. Finally, he concluded, "I wish to make a formal announcement regarding my medical practice. As many of you know, Mrs. Charlotte Adams has been assisting me these past 2 months, bringing welcome organization and additional care to our community. Today, I'm pleased to announce that the Territorial Medical Board has approved Mrs. Adams's registration as an official medical apprentice under my supervision. A murmur rippled through the congregation. Charlotte kept her expression composed despite feeling every eye upon her. This appointment recognizes Mrs. Adams's intelligence, dedication, and natural healing abilities, Nathan continued. Silver Creek will benefit greatly from having additional medical expertise, particularly for women's concerns and children's ailments. I hope you'll join me in congratulating her on this achievement. He gestured for Charlotte to stand. She did, so reluctantly, balancing Emily on her hip while Sarah held Michael. The congregation's response was mixed. Some applauded politely, others whispered behind raised hands, and a few, notably Margaret Morrison and her companions, sat with stony expressions. Mrs. Adams will increasingly handle routine cases independently, Nathan explained, allowing me to devote more time to serious conditions and distant homesteads where medical care has been limited. This arrangement expands medical services available to all residents of Silver Creek and surrounding areas. His framing was masterful, Charlotte realized, positioning her role as community benefit rather than personal advancement, emphasizing practical advantages that even the most traditional residents would find difficult to dismiss. By the time they exited the church, several women had approached to congratulate her, including some who had previously kept their distance. Well handled, Sarah murmured as they walked home for Sunday dinner. Nathan always did know how to manage public opinion when it mattered to him. The medical benefits are genuine, Charlotte pointed out. It's not merely a matter of impression. Of course, Sarah agreed. But make no mistake, my brother rarely makes public pronouncements unless something matters deeply to him. The implication lingered in Charlotte's mind throughout dinner and into the evening as she prepared for the coming week's appointments. If her position truly mattered deeply to Nathan Taylor, beyond practical considerations, what did that suggest about his feelings? Toward her, the question remained unanswered as Monday dawned bright and busy. Charlotte focused on work, pushing personal considerations aside as patient after patient arrived seeking treatment for various spring ailments. By mid-afternoon, she had independently handled a dozen minor cases, feeling growing confidence in her medical judgment. As the last scheduled patient departed, the office door opened again, admitting Jack Morrison. Charlotte straightened, surprised by his unexpected appearance. "Mr. Morrison," she acknowledged coolly, "how may we assist you?" "I need to speak with Taylor," he replied tersely. "Privately. Dr. Taylor is performing a minor surgery. He should be finished shortly." Charlotte gestured to the waiting area. "You're welcome to wait." Morrison remained standing, his expression unusually agitated. "I'll wait in his private office." "I'm afraid that's not possible," Charlotte countered firmly. "Patient records and confidential correspondence are kept there." Anger flashed across Morrison's face. "You presume to dictate terms to me? You're nothing but a glorified nurse playing medicine while living under a man's roof without the benefit of marriage. Don't overestimate your position in this town, Mrs. Adams." The attack was so unexpected and virulent that Charlotte momentarily lost her composure. She took a steadying breath before responding. "Your personal opinion of me is irrelevant, Mr. Morrison. Office procedures apply equally to everyone, regardless of their standing in Silver Creek." "We'll see about that," Morrison muttered. "Things are changing. Your unnatural arrangement with Taylor won't continue unchallenged." Before Charlotte could respond, Nathan emerged from the surgery, removing a blood-stained apron and washing his hands thoroughly at the basin. His expression darkened as he took in Morrison's hostile stance and Charlotte's rigid posture. "Morrison," he acknowledged curtly. "What brings you here?" "A matter requiring private discussion," Morrison replied, "regarding certain investments and community concerns." Nathan dried his hands methodically. "Mrs. Adams has my complete confidence. Anything you wish to discuss can be said in her presence." The merchant's jaw tightened. "Very well. The town council met yesterday evening. There's a movement to enforce certain moral standards for businesses operating in Silver Creek, particularly those serving vulnerable populations." "Meaning?" Nathan prompted, though his expression suggested he already understood the implication. "Meaning your living and working arrangements with Mrs. Adams have raised concerns about the propriety of your medical practice," Morrison stated bluntly. "Either formalize your relationship through marriage, replace her with a male assistant, or face the possibility of official censure from the council." Shock rendered Charlotte momentarily speechless. The ultimatum laid bare the extent of opposition to her position and the limited options for addressing it. Nathan, however, appeared more angry than surprised. "The council has no authority over medical licensure or practice. That falls under territorial jurisdiction." "True," Morrison conceded with a thin smile. "But the council approves all business licenses within town limits. Your office operates under such a license, renewal due next month." The implicit threat hung in the air. Without a business license, Nathan could continue practicing medicine, but would be forced to relocate his office outside town boundaries, a significant hardship for both him and his patients. "Who exactly comprises this movement?" Nathan demanded. "You and whoever else holds debt at Campbell's Bank? Or is Blackwater Mining Company applying pressure again for my support of their clinic proposal?" Morrison's expression confirmed the accuracy of at least one assumption. Various concerned citizens share these views, including prominent church members, business leaders, and the Ladies' Aid Society. How convenient that moral outrage aligns so perfectly with business interests, Nathan observed coldly. "The council meets next Friday, correct? I'll address these concerns formally at that time." "As is your right," Morrison acknowledged. "But be prepared for public discussion of matters you might prefer kept private." His gaze shifted meaningfully to Charlotte before he departed, leaving tension thick in his wake. When the door closed behind him, Charlotte finally found her voice. "I'm so sorry. I never intended to create such difficulties for you or the practice." "You've created nothing," Nathan replied firmly. "This is about control, not morality. Morrison never forgiven me for purchasing the land he wanted for expansion 15 years ago. The Blackwater situation merely adds current motivation to old grudges." Charlotte shook her head, unconvinced. "Nevertheless, your practice shouldn't suffer because of my presence." "Perhaps I should—" "Don't," he interrupted, his voice softening as he moved closer. "Don't suggest leaving, Charlotte. Whatever Morrison and his allies attempt, we'll face it together." The conviction in his voice steadied her, but the merchant's ultimatum echoed in her mind. Either formalize your relationship through marriage, replace her with a male assistant, or face official censure. The options felt equally impossible, and the coming confrontation unavoidable. The week leading up to the town council meeting passed in a storm of activity. Word of Jack Morrison's ultimatum spread through Silver Creek with the speed of prairie fire, dividing the community into factions. While Charlotte maintained professional composure during office hours, privately, she battled waves of anxiety about the impending confrontation and its potential consequences. On Thursday afternoon, as the last patient departed, Charlotte closed the office ledger with uncharacteristic force. "This is absurd," she declared, turning to Nathan, who was organizing surgical instruments in the adjacent room. "The council meeting tomorrow will be about me, not the practice. My presence is causing division in a community that accepted you without question for 20 years. Nathan looked up, his expression somber. "This isn't about you, Charlotte. It's about power and who wields it in Silver Creek. Morrison and his allies are using our arrangement as convenient leverage for broader aims. Nevertheless, I'm the leverage. They're using, she countered, moving to stand in the doorway. I've been thinking about Sarah's offer. His brow furrowed. What offer? To manage her boarding house while she visits her cousin in Denver this summer. The position includes accommodation for me and the twins. Charlotte's voice remained steady, despite the tightness in her chest. It would eliminate the immediate pretext for opposition to your practice. Nathan set down the instruments with deliberate care. For a long moment he remained silent, his back to her, as he seemingly studied the contents of the medical cabinet. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an edge she'd never heard before. Is that what you want, Charlotte? To abandon your medical training? To retreat into conventional women's work because a few small-minded individuals object to your advancement? Of course not, she replied, stung by his characterization. I've found purpose and fulfillment in this work that I never imagined possible, but I won't be the cause of destroying what you've built here. He turned then, crossing the distance between them with purposeful strides. You've become essential to what we're building here, not just to the practice, but to the community's health. Every woman who brings her children to you, rather than suffering in silence, every expectant mother who receives proper care because she trusts you, they matter more than Morrison's machinations. The intensity in his green eyes held her immobile. They stood barely a foot apart, closer than propriety, would strictly allow, close enough that Charlotte could detect the faint scent of the carbolic soap he used after examinations. Nathan, she said softly, using his given name with the comfortable familiarity that had developed between them, I don't want to leave, but I see no acceptable alternative. His expression shifted at the sound of his name on her lips. There is another option, he said, voice dropping to match her quiet tone. One I've considered for weeks, but hesitated to propose for fear of appearing to take advantage of your situation. Charlotte's pulse quickened as she grasped his meaning. Marriage, she whispered. Yes. His gaze remained steady on hers. Not as Morrison's ultimatum demands, but as a partnership of equals. Your medical apprenticeship would continue. Your children would have stability, and together we could build something meaningful here in Silver Creek. A marriage of convenience, Charlotte stated, needing clarity despite the sudden hollowness in her chest. No, Nathan shook his head firmly. A marriage of choice, of mutual respect, of... He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. Growing affection, at least on my part. The admission hung between them, altering the atmosphere as surely as storm clouds transform a summer sky. Charlotte struggled to form a response, her carefully maintained composure fragmenting under the weight of his words and her own conflicted emotions. I need time, she finally managed. This is unexpected. Understanding crossed his features as he stepped back, restoring the proper distance between them. Of course, take whatever time you need. My proposal stands independent of tomorrow's council meeting, which I'll handle regardless of your decision. Charlotte nodded gratefully, though confusion still clouded her thoughts. I should check on the twins, she murmured, retreating toward the connecting passage to their living quarters. Charlotte, Nathan called softly as she reached the door. She paused without turning. Whatever you decide, your position here is secure. I'll contest any attempt to separate you from the work you've come to love. His promise followed her through the evening as she tended to the twins, prepared dinner, and moved through the domestic routines that punctuated her days. After the children were asleep, she sat alone in the small sitting room adjoining her bedroom, a medical text opened but unread in her lap, marriage to Nathan Taylor. The prospect simultaneously terrified and attracted her. Their professional partnership had evolved into genuine friendship over the past months. She respected his intelligence, admired his dedication to his patients, appreciated his acceptance of her children. But marriage meant vulnerability of a different kind, opening herself to potential heartbreak should his growing affection prove insufficient foundation for lifelong commitment. Her first marriage, though brief, had been built on romantic love. Samuel Adams had courted her properly, won her heart with poetry and promises, created a vision of their future that included children and companionship. His death had shattered that vision, leaving Charlotte to navigate widowhood and motherhood. Simultaneously, would marriage to Nathan offer security without love? Or could respect and shared purpose evolve into deeper attachment? And did she even want that possibility with the risk of loss it inevitably carried? Sleep eluded her long into the night as she weighed options and examined her own conflicted heart. Dawn found her still undecided, but determined to face the council meeting with dignity, regardless of personal turmoil. Friday dawned bright and unseasonably warm for late April. Charlotte dressed with particular care in her best navy dress with white collar and cuffs, her honey-brown hair arranged in a simple but elegant knot. The outfit projected capability and respectability, qualities she would need in abundance at the afternoon's confrontation. The morning passed in a blur of patience and preparations. Nathan was unusually quiet, respecting her need for space to consider his proposal. Sarah arrived shortly before noon to watch the twins during the meeting, greeting Charlotte with a worried smile. "Half the town will be there," she informed them over a hasty lunch. "Jack has been rallying supporters all week, but you have allies. Too, every woman you've treated is speaking in your defense. I appreciate their support," Charlotte replied, "though I regret putting them in the position of opposing established authorities." Sarah snorted indelicately. "Established authorities need opposing when they overstep. Jack Morrison may own the largest store in town, but that doesn't give him the right to dictate how people live or work." At precisely 2 o'clock, Charlotte and Nathan entered Silver Creek's town hall, a modest building adjacent to the church. The meeting room was already filled to capacity, townsfolk packed onto wooden benches with barely room to shift position. A raised platform at the front held a long table, where the 5 council members sat with varying expressions of discomfort or determination. Mayor Wilson occupied the center position, flanked by Jack Morrison and bank manager William Campbell. On one side, blacksmith Joseph Miller and rancher Frank Thompson on the other. The composition suggested a divided council, 2 merchants aligned with Morrison's interests, 2 working men who might prove more sympathetic to practical considerations. Charlotte and Nathan found seats near the front, courtesy of Maggie Brooks, who had saved places for them. As they settled, Charlotte felt dozens of gazes upon them, some supportive, others openly hostile. Margaret Morrison, seated prominently in the front row opposite them, made no attempt to hide her contemptuous scrutiny. Mayor Wilson called the meeting to order with obvious reluctance. "We gather to address concerns raised regarding certain businesses and practices within town limits," he began diplomatically, "specifically whether particular arrangements at Dr. Taylor's medical practice meet community standards expected of Silver Creek establishments." "Speak plainly, Wilson," Morrison interrupted. "The issue is whether a woman with no medical credentials should be permitted to practice medicine while living unchaperoned in a bachelor's home. It's a matter of public health and public morality." Nathan rose immediately, his composure unwavering despite the provocation. "If we are speaking plainly, let's acknowledge what this is really about. Mrs. Adams is formally registered with the Territorial Medical Board as my apprentice, a legal position recognized throughout Montana Territory. Her presence in my household is as a respected employee with separate living quarters." "Separate quarters under the same roof," Campbell interjected, "which creates the appearance of impropriety regardless of actual arrangements." "I wasn't aware. The council regulated appearances rather than actions," Nathan countered evenly. Mrs. Adams's character is beyond reproach. Her work has substantially improved medical care available to this community, particularly for women and children who previously suffered in silence rather than consult a male physician. Charlotte maintained a dignified expression, despite her discomfort at being discussed as though absent. Around the room, she noted several women nodding agreement with Nathan's assessment. Mothers whose children she had treated, expectant women she had guided through pregnancy complications. No one questions Mrs. Adams's technical competence, Morrison stated dismissively. The issue is propriety. Silver Creek businesses must maintain standards that reflect our community values. A woman living in a man's household without the benefit of marriage or family relationship violates those standards. Does it indeed? The new voice came from Sarah Parker, who had risen from her seat near the back. If so, I must be violating standards as well, housing single men and women under one roof at my boarding house. That's different, Margaret Morrison objected immediately. Boarding houses have established protocols and separate facilities. As does my brother's residence, Sarah countered. The real difference is that Charlotte Adams threatens certain people's assumptions about women's proper place. The exchange ignited a wave of comments from the assembled crowd, voices rising as people took sides. Mayor Wilson banged his gavel, repeatedly, struggling to restore order. In the momentary lull that followed, Charlotte made her decision. She stood, smoothing her skirts with steady hands before addressing the council directly. Gentlemen, if I may speak on my own behalf. Mayor Wilson nodded, relief evident in his expression at having someone new take the floor. Proceed, Mrs. Adams. Charlotte surveyed the room, drawing strength from the supportive faces among the hostile ones. I came to Silver Creek as a widow, with infant twins, seeking security through marriage to Mr. Jack Morrison, who had advertised for a bride in Eastern newspapers. A ripple of reaction passed through the crowd at this direct reference to her initial rejection. Jack Morrison's face darkened, but Charlotte continued undeterred. Upon arrival, I found my circumstances misunderstood and my children unwelcome. When that arrangement failed, Dr. Taylor offered employment that recognized my educational background and provided accommodations suitable for a woman with young children. Her steady gaze moved from face to face among the council members. During these past 3 months, I have assisted with dozens of medical cases, maintained precise records of treatments and outcomes, and studied extensively to increase my knowledge of modern medical practice. Women who previously avoided treatment now seek care regularly. Children receive prompt attention for injuries and illnesses. Charlotte paused, drawing a deep breath before continuing with measured certainty. I understand concerns about appearances. Propriety matters in close communities, but surely substance matters more than appearance. The question before you isn't whether our arrangement looks conventional, but whether it serves the greater good of Silver Creek's citizens. The silence that followed her statement felt charged with possibility. She remained standing, shoulders straight, gaze steady, presenting herself not as a woman seeking approval, but as a professional defending her right to serve. Blacksmith Joseph Miller broke the silence, addressing his fellow council members. My wife Martha wouldn't be alive without Mrs. Adams's quick thinking when she hemorrhaged after our last baby came. Doc Taylor was 10 miles away at the Simpson place. Mrs. Adams knew exactly what to do, saved Martha's life before he could even get there. His weathered face hardened as he looked at Morrison. I don't much care about appearances when weighed against my wife's life. Rancher Thompson nodded agreement. My Agnes won't see any doctor but Mrs. Adams for her female complaints. Says she suffered for years before having someone she could speak to openly. Mayor Wilson, sensing the council's division and the community sentiment, attempted compromise. Perhaps a formal chaperoning arrangement could address the propriety concerns while allowing Mrs. Adams's valuable work to continue. Or perhaps, Nathan said, rising to stand beside Charlotte, a more permanent solution is appropriate. He turned to face her directly, taking her hands in his. Charlotte Adams, I intended a more private setting for this, but circumstances demand directness. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife, partner in life as you've become partner? In my practice? Gasps and murmurs erupted around the room. Charlotte's eyes widened at the public proposal, so different from their private discussion. Yet as she looked into Nathan's face, she saw not calculation, but genuine emotion, affection, respect, and something deeper that stirred answering feelings in her own heart. In that moment of connection, her doubts dissolved like morning mist under Montana sunshine. This was no marriage of convenience or strategic alliance, but the natural culmination of a relationship built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and growing attachment that she now recognized had matured into love on both sides. Yes, she replied, with quiet certainty. I will. The simple acceptance transformed the atmosphere instantly. Applause broke out from supporters, while even critics appeared mollified by the prospect of convention being satisfied. Only Margaret Morrison maintained her stony expression, rising abruptly to exit the hall with dramatic indignation. Mayor Wilson seized the opportunity to conclude the contentious meeting. Well, it appears concerns about propriety will be addressed through the most traditional means possible, unless there are objections. I propose we consider this matter resolved and move to regularly scheduled business. As the meeting shifted to mundane town matters, Charlotte and Nathan slipped outside into the afternoon sunshine, still holding hands as they walked slowly toward home. That was quite a performance, Charlotte said when they were beyond earshot of the hall, though I can't help wondering if you felt pressured by circumstances to make such a public declaration. Nathan stopped walking, turning to face her fully. The public setting was expedient, I admit, but the sentiment behind it was entirely genuine. His eyes held hers with unwavering sincerity. I've known since you stood up to Morrison in my office, that first day, that you were a woman of exceptional character. What I couldn't have anticipated was how completely you would transform not just my practice, but my life. Charlotte felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. I came to Silver Creek seeking security, expecting to sacrifice independence for stability. Instead, I found a partnership I never imagined possible. Professional and personal. Is that a yes under less dramatic circumstances? Nathan asked, a hint of vulnerability beneath his calm exterior. In answer, Charlotte rose on tiptoes to press a gentle kiss to his cheek, her first such gesture, shocking in its public setting, yet perfect in its timing. It's a yes without reservation or condition, she confirmed softly. Not for appearance or convenience, but because I've discovered that the heart can heal and open again to possibilities I thought forever lost. Their return to the doctor's residence, soon to be their shared home in truth as well as appearance, was accompanied by congratulatory calls from neighbors and patients who had witnessed the proposal. Sarah greeted them at the door, her knowing smile suggesting she had anticipated this outcome long before either of them had recognized its inevitability. Inside, the twins babbled happily in their play area, unaware that their world had just shifted axis once again. Michael pulled himself up on unsteady legs, reaching toward Nathan with complete trust in his chubby hands. Emily watched her brother with calculating eyes, clearly planning her own approach to mobility. As Charlotte observed Nathan lifting Michael with practiced ease, his expression one of genuine affection rather than obligation, she marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. From rejected mail-order bride to respected medical apprentice to future wife and partner, each apparent setback revealing itself as a step toward unexpected happiness. "We'll need to write to the medical board," Nathan said pragmatically, though. His eyes remained soft as he bounced Michael gently. "Your apprenticeship status changes somewhat as my wife, but there are precedents for husband-wife medical practices throughout the territory. Practical considerations already," Charlotte teased, lifting Emily as the little girl demanded equal attention. "We've been engaged for less than an hour." "Professional and personal," Nathan replied with a smile that transformed his serious features. "That's our partnership, isn't it? In all aspects of life." The simple truth of his statement settled over Charlotte like a benediction. Whatever challenges lay ahead, from Morrison's continued opposition to the everyday difficulties of frontier medicine, they would face them together, their unexpected family forged not from conventional beginnings, but from mutual respect, shared purpose, and love that had bloomed in the most unlikely soil. But their moment of peace was interrupted by a sharp knock at the office door. Charlotte and Nathan exchanged glances. The practice was closed for the afternoon due to the town meeting. "I'll go," Nathan said, handing Michael to Sarah before crossing to the connecting passage. Charlotte followed, still holding Emily, curious about who would seek medical attention so urgently. From the doorway between house and office, she watched as Nathan admitted two men. One, a formally dressed stranger carrying a leather portfolio. The other, the telegraph operator, looking uncomfortable. "Dr. Taylor?" the stranger inquired, his accent marking him as Eastern. "I'm Elliot Chambers, attorney at law from Boston. I've been searching for Mrs. Charlotte Adams, née Wilson, for nearly 4 months. Your telegraph operator kindly directed me here." Charlotte stepped forward, her heart suddenly racing. "I'm Charlotte Adams." The lawyer turned, assessing her with professional detachment. "Mrs. Adams, I represent the estate of Professor Robert Wilson, your father. I regret to inform you of his passing in December last." The news, though not entirely unexpected given her father's age and declining health, still struck Charlotte with surprising force. I wrote to him before leaving Boston. The letter must have arrived after his passing." "Indeed," Chambers confirmed. "It was through that letter forwarded to my office that we finally located you." He opened his portfolio, extracting several documents. "I've traveled personally to deliver news that couldn't be entrusted to telegraph or post." Charlotte tightened her hold on Emily, sensing that whatever the lawyer had come to say went beyond notification of her father's death. "Please continue." "Mr. Chambers, your father's will, revised shortly before his death, names you as his sole heir. The estate includes the family home in Cambridge, his investment portfolio, and significant holdings in several railroad companies." Chambers paused, apparently gauging her reaction. "The total value exceeds $70,000. The amount, a fortune by any standard, rendered Charlotte momentarily speechless. Nathan moved to her side, his steady presence grounding her as the implications became clear. "I had no idea," she finally managed. "Father and I had been estranged since my marriage. Samuel was not his choice for me." Chambers nodded, unsurprised. Professor Wilson acknowledged this estrangement in a letter accompanying the will. He expressed regret for his intransigence and hoped the inheritance might secure your future and that of his grandchildren, whom he never had the opportunity to meet. The poignancy of this reconciliation too late brought tears to Charlotte's eyes. She blinked them away, focusing on practical matters as Nathan had taught her to do in moments of high emotion. "What are the requirements for claiming the inheritance?" "Merely your signature on several documents, which I've brought. The estate has been in probate since January and is now ready for transfer." The lawyer hesitated, then continued with practiced neutrality. "Many heirs in your position choose to return east to manage such substantial holdings personally." The statement hung in the air like a challenge to the decision she had just made. Charlotte felt Nathan tense beside her, though his expression remained carefully composed. Here was another unexpected turn. Financial independence beyond anything she could have imagined when she'd boarded that stagecoach in February. She could return to Boston as a wealthy woman, raise her children in comfort in her childhood home, perhaps even establish a medical practice in a city where such things were becoming more acceptable for women. Or she could stay in Silver Creek, building both a family and a professional legacy with the man beside her, in a community that, for all its prejudices, had ultimately offered her opportunities for growth that might never have come in Boston's more rigid society. Charlotte looked from Nathan to Sarah, from the lawyer to the twins, considering the paths before her. Then, with the decisiveness that had carried her through widowhood, motherhood, and the challenges of the past 3 months, she made her choice. "Mr. Chambers," Charlotte said at last, shifting Emily to her other arm, "I appreciate your journey. To deliver this news personally, would you join us for dinner this evening? We can discuss the details of my father's estate then." If the lawyer was surprised by her composure in the face of such life-altering news, he concealed it well. "I would be honored, Mrs. Adams. I've taken a room at Mrs. Parker's boarding house for several days, anticipating that you might have questions." After arranging a time for dinner, Nathan showed the lawyer out, returning to find Charlotte sitting at his desk, Emily now contentedly playing on a blanket nearby. Her expression was thoughtful but remarkably calm. $70,000, he said quietly, taking the chair opposite her. A substantial change in circumstances. Charlotte met his gaze directly. "Does it change things between us?" "That depends entirely on what you decide to do with it," Nathan replied carefully. "Many would see it as an opportunity to return east." "Is that what you think I should do?" He shook his head slowly. "What I think doesn't matter. This is your decision, Charlotte, your future and your children's future." She studied him for a long moment, noting the carefully neutral expression that couldn't quite mask the tension around his eyes. "You promised once that whatever happened you would contest any attempt to separate me from the work I've come to love," she reminded him. "Does that promise still stand?" "Of course," he replied without hesitation. "And what of your other promise, the one you made an hour ago in the town hall?" A flush rose in his cheeks. "Charlotte, I would never hold you to an engagement made before such significant news. Your circumstances have fundamentally changed." She rose and moved around the desk to stand before him. "My circumstances have changed," she agreed. "But my heart hasn't." Relief flooded his features as he reached for her hands. "You'll stay in Silver Creek." "I'll stay," she confirmed, "but not exactly as things were." Confusion replaced relief. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Dr. Taylor, that I intend to use my inheritance to expand our medical practice beyond anything Silver Creek has seen before." Excitement colored her voice as she continued. "A proper hospital wing, with dedicated rooms for surgery and recovery, modern equipment from Chicago, perhaps even funding for another doctor to join us, allowing more frequent circuits to outlying homesteads." Nathan stared at her, astonishment giving way to growing enthusiasm as he grasped the possibilities. "Charlotte, that's extraordinary. But are you certain? This inheritance could provide you with independence, a life of comfort." "I've had quite enough of living for security alone," she interrupted gently. "These past 3 months have taught me that purpose and partnership bring far greater rewards than mere comfort." She squeezed his hands. "Besides, what better tribute to my father than using his legacy to build something meaningful? He was an educator. Now his estate will educate and heal." That evening, Mr. Chambers joined them for dinner, along with Sarah. As the lawyer detailed the specifics of Professor Wilson's estate, Charlotte asked precise questions about the legal structure of the inheritance and the flexibility she would have in managing the assets. so I need not return to Boston permanently to claim the inheritance, she clarified. No, though periodic visits would be advisable, Chambers explained. The properties can be managed by the current estate agent. The financial holdings require more active oversight, but much can be handled through correspondence. Your father anticipated you might not wish to return east immediately. He extracted another document from his portfolio. This letter of introduction to the Montana Territorial Bank in Helena authorizes the establishment of accounts in your name, with assets transferred via telegraph from Boston. As the conversation progressed, Charlotte outlined her vision for using the inheritance, explaining her medical apprenticeship and the community's needs. Rather than expressing surprise at such unconventional plans for a female heir, Chambers nodded with professional appreciation. Professor Wilson often mentioned your independent spirit, Mrs. Adams. I believe he would approve of such pragmatic and forward-thinking use of his estate. The lawyer hesitated, then added more personally, if I may speak frankly, your father regretted his inflexibility regarding your marriage. His will represents his final attempt to support your choices rather than dictate them. Later that night, after their guests had departed and the twins were asleep, Charlotte and Nathan sat before the fire in the parlor, discussing their suddenly expanded possibilities. Jack Morrison's face when he learns you're now the wealthiest. One person in Silver Creek, Nathan mused, a smile playing at his lips. Charlotte laughed softly. I care less about that than his reaction to our new hospital wing, which his store will no longer be able to overlook from its upper windows. You truly intend to build it right here? We could establish something grander in Helena, or even Great Falls. She shook her head firmly. Silver Creek is where I found myself again, not as someone's widow or someone's mail-order bride, but as a person of value in my own right. This town deserves the best medical facility we can provide. Her expression softened. Besides, it's where our family began. The Silver Creek Church had never looked more beautiful than on this early June morning. Wildflowers gathered from the surrounding prairie filled simple mason jars along the pews, their vibrant colors standing bright against the whitewashed walls. Sunlight streamed through windows thrown open to catch the gentle breeze carrying the sweet scent of early summer across the gathered congregation. Charlotte stood in the small antechamber, Sarah Parker making final adjustments to her dress. Ivory silk that Charlotte had ordered from Helena, arriving just days before the ceremony. The past 6 weeks since the town council meeting and the revelation of her inheritance had passed in a whirlwind of preparation, both for the wedding and for the expansion of the medical practice that would follow. The bank manager nearly swallowed his tongue when you presented the draft from Boston. Sarah chuckled, smoothing the delicate lace at the collar. William Campbell's never processed a transaction that size in his life. His expression was nothing compared to the territorial medical boards when I submitted plans for the new medical center, Charlotte replied, touching the cameo brooch Sarah had insisted she wear, a Taylor family heirloom passing from one generation's bride to the next. I believe they're still determining how to respond to a female benefactor establishing a hospital. Sarah stepped back to assess the final effect. Perfect. Now, are the twins ready for their grand entrance? Charlotte smiled, glancing to where 7-month-old Emily and Michael sat in matching outfits, unusually clean and presentable. They had grown remarkably in the months since arriving in Silver Creek. Both babies had begun crawling with determination, Michael slightly ahead in motor skills, while Emily excelled in verbal development. They would participate in the ceremony, in their own way, carried by Sarah and Maggie as honorary attendants. As ready as they'll ever be, Charlotte replied, though I suspect Michael will attempt to escape the moment the ceremony begins. Andy is prepared for interception, Sarah assured her with a chuckle. That boy has grown remarkably nimble since. Your children arrived. A gentle knock at the door announced Reverend Thomas, his kind face appearing around the edge as he entered. It's time, Mrs. Adams. Dr. Taylor appears to be wearing a groove in the floorboards with his pacing. Charlotte took a deep, steadying breath. Unlike her first wedding, a small, somber affair overshadowed by her father's disapproval, this ceremony represented not desperate hope, but confident certainty. She had come to know Nathan Taylor through daily interaction, professional partnership, and quiet evenings of conversation. Their foundation was built not on romantic illusion, but on mutual respect, shared purpose, and affection that had deepened into love through time and understanding. I'm ready, she said, gathering her simple bouquet of prairie roses. The small church had filled to capacity, townsfolk crowding the pews in their Sunday finest. Charlotte noted with satisfaction that the attendance included not just supporters, but former critics as well. Even Jack Morrison sat in a middle pew, his expression carefully neutral, but his presence a tacit acknowledgement of the changing dynamics in Silver Creek since the announcement of her inheritance and plans for the medical center. Only Margaret. Morrison was conspicuously absent, having departed for an extended visit to relatives in St. Louis shortly after the town council meeting. Rumors suggested she might not return to Silver Creek at all, having received a marriage proposal from a widowed shopkeeper there. Nathan waited at the altar, tall and distinguished in his best black suit, his normally serious expression transformed by barely contained joy as Charlotte proceeded slowly down the aisle. Behind her came Sarah carrying Emily and Maggie with Michael, both babies wide-eyed at the unusual gathering. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. Traditional vows, spoken with quiet conviction by both bride and groom. When Reverend Thomas invited Nathan to kiss his bride, the gentle touch of his lips against hers felt like both culmination and beginning, closing one chapter of their story while opening another filled with promise. As they turned to face the congregation as husband and wife, Michael broke free from Maggie's arms, crawling with remarkable speed toward his mother and new stepfather. The laughter that rippled through the assembly dispelled any remaining formality as Nathan scooped up the determined infant, including him, in their first moments as a family. The celebration continued at what was now, officially, the Taylor family home, where tables had been set up in the garden for a community feast. Women from across Silver Creek had contributed dishes, creating a spread that represented the town's diverse cultural heritage. Children played games on the lawn while adults mingled, conversations flowing more easily across social boundaries than ever before. Charlotte found herself continuously surrounded by well-wishers, many expressing genuine gratitude for her decision to invest in Silver Creek's future rather than returning east. Mrs. Benton, whose difficult pregnancy Charlotte had monitored with particular care, proudly displayed her healthy 2-month-old daughter. Farmers' wives, who had previously suffered in silence with women's complaints, pressed her hands and whispered thanks for discreet treatments that had improved their quality of life. Even Victoria Wilson, once part of the opposition delegation, approached with genuine respect. "Silver Creek will be transformed by your medical center, Mrs. Taylor," she acknowledged. "My husband tells me the plans you've submitted exceed anything in the territory." "The community deserves nothing less," Charlotte replied diplomatically. As afternoon mellowed toward evening, the gathering gradually diminished as families with young children departed for home. Nathan found Charlotte sitting on the garden bench, observing Sarah supervising the twins' interaction with other children. "Happy?" he asked, joining her with 2 glasses of Mrs. Henderson's renowned elderberry wine. "Completely," Charlotte confirmed, accepting the glass and leaning slightly against his shoulder. "Though I confess to some trepidation about tomorrow." Tomorrow would bring significant changes to their professional lives. With their marriage official, Charlotte's status would shift from apprentice to partner in the practice. The territorial medical supervisor was scheduled to visit, formalizing her expanded role and approving new credentials that would allow her to treat patients independently while continuing her medical education. Dr. Reynolds is progressive in his views, Nathan assured her. He supervised a husband-wife practice in Helena for years before accepting the territorial position. Your qualifications speak for themselves. Charlotte sipped her wine thoughtfully. It's not just the inspection. The architects arrive from Helena next week to begin planning the new medical center. The plans Charlotte had commissioned were ambitious. A modern facility adjoining the current practice, with dedicated surgical space, recovery rooms, and even a small laboratory for testing and research. The inheritance that had initially seemed a potential path away from Silver Creek had instead become the means to cement her place within it, creating a legacy that would serve the community for generations. Change brings opportunity, Nathan reminded her, his fingers intertwining with hers. The center means expanded care for the entire region, and a more significant target for those who still oppose women in medicine, Charlotte added, though without real concern. The announcement of her inheritance had transformed her position in Silver Creek overnight. Former critics now courted her favor, aware that the planned medical center would bring prosperity to the entire town. Nathan smiled. Jack Morrison has already approached me about supplying furnishings for the new building. Amazing how financial considerations can overcome moral objections. Speaking of financial considerations, Charlotte said, lowering her voice slightly, I've received a letter from the Territorial Governor's office. Apparently, news of our project has reached Helena. They're interested in establishing similar facilities throughout Montana, potentially with territorial funding. Nathan's eyebrows rose in surprise. That would transform medical care across the territory? It would, Charlotte agreed, and they've requested that I serve on the planning commission. Pride colored her voice despite her attempt at casualness. It seems a mail-order bride rejected at the stagecoach stop might help shape the future of medicine in Montana Territory. They couldn't find anyone better qualified, Nathan said with genuine admiration. Though I expect such responsibilities. We'll take you to Helena periodically. Us, Charlotte corrected. They've requested both our expertise. It seems we've become something of a model for rural medical partnerships. She squeezed his hand. Professional and personal, remember? As twilight descended, the last guests departed, leaving the family to their first evening together in their new status. After settling the exhausted twins in their nursery, Charlotte and Nathan stood for a moment, watching their peaceful slumber. I keep thinking about that first day at the stagecoach, Charlotte whispered. How desperate I felt when Jack Morrison rejected us, how impossible the future seemed. And now, Nathan prompted, his arms slipping around her waist, now I understand that what felt like disaster was actually deliverance. She turned within his embrace to face him. If Morrison had welcomed us as planned, I would have become exactly what I feared, dependent, voiceless, defined solely by my relationship to him. Instead, you've defined yourself, Nathan observed proudly. We've defined ourselves, she corrected, rising on tiptoes to brush a kiss against his lips. All of us, together. The family they had formed defied conventional origins, a rejected mail-order bride with infant twins, a widowed doctor still haunted by past losses, all thrown together by circumstance and chance recognition. Yet from these unlikely beginnings had grown something remarkable, a partnership that would heal not just themselves but countless others through the legacy they were building. 1 year later, Charlotte stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching as workers placed the final section of the sign above the entrance to the newly completed Silver Creek Medical Center. The gleaming 2-story structure, with its modern facilities and dedicated staff quarters for visiting specialists, represented the fulfillment of her vision and the productive use of her father's legacy. Nathan joined her, 7-month-old Catherine cradled in his arms, while Emily and Michael, now sturdy 18-month-olds, played under Sarah's watchful eye in the garden. "What do you think?" he asked, nodding toward the sign. "Taylor and Taylor, physicians and surgeons." Charlotte smiled, placing a hand over her still flat abdomen, where their 4th child had just begun to make its presence known. "I think my father would be proud, and Caroline would approve of how we've honored her memory." The center's East Wing, dedicated to women's and children's medicine, had been named for Nathan's first wife, acknowledgement that the past remained part of their present without overshadowing their future. Similarly, the medical library bore Professor Wilson's name, housing not only medical texts but educational materials for patients and training resources for the nurses Charlotte had begun recruiting from surrounding communities. The first medical students arrive next month, Nathan reminded her, shifting Catherine as she reached for her mother's hair. The territorial board was impressively efficient in approving our teaching certification. Nothing motivates bureaucracy like progress. They can take partial credit for, Charlotte observed dryly, taking her daughter into her arms. The territorial government had indeed embraced the concept of rural medical centers after seeing Silver Creek's success, appropriating funds for similar facilities while conveniently positioning themselves as visionaries for medical advancement. Speaking of the territorial board, Nathan continued, have you considered their offer? Charlotte nodded slowly. The board had recently approached her about developing a formal training program for female medical apprentices to be headquartered at Silver Creek, but eventually expanded throughout Montana. It represented recognition of her growing influence in territorial medicine, despite, or perhaps because of, her unconventional path. I'm inclined to accept, she said, with conditions. I won't compromise our family time or the center's primary mission of patient care. The board will agree to whatever terms you set, Nathan predicted. They need you more than you need them. As they stood together watching the activity around the new medical center, Charlotte reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From desperate widow to mail-order bride, to rejected traveler, to medical apprentice, to wealthy heir, to respected physician, each transformation, building upon the last, to create a life richer and more purposeful than anything she could have imagined. When she'd first stepped from that stagecoach into the swirling snow, Jack Morrison approached from the direction of his store, carrying a package. His attitude toward the Taylors had evolved from antagonism to grudging respect to practical business partnership as the medical center's economic benefits to Silver Creek became evident. The special instruments you ordered from Chicago have arrived, Dr. Taylor, he announced, addressing Charlotte with the professional title she had earned 6 months earlier after completing her formal certification. Shall I have them delivered to the surgical suite? Yes. Thank you, Mr. Morrison, Charlotte replied pleasantly. Dr. Reynolds will want to inspect them when he arrives tomorrow. As Morrison departed with a respectful nod, Nathan chuckled softly. Remember when he insisted women had no place in medicine? People change, Charlotte observed, bouncing Catherine gently as the baby began to fuss. Communities evolve. Sometimes they just need someone to show them a different possibility. A stagecoach appeared at the far end of the street, slowing as it approached the town center. Charlotte watched with interest. This would be the 3rd physician to arrive this month, drawn by the opportunity to work at the territory's most advanced medical facility. Each brought specialized knowledge that enriched their practice and expanded the care they could offer. Another colleague arrives, Nathan noted, following her gaze. Another piece of the future we're building, Charlotte corrected, leaning into his embrace as they watched the stagecoach draw closer. The scene echoed her own arrival in Silver Creek, yet everything had changed. Where once a desperate young mother had faced rejection and uncertainty, now stood a confident physician and community leader. Where once a grieving widower had lived in isolation, now stood a loving husband and father embracing his expanded family, and where a struggling frontier outpost had once enforced rigid conventions to maintain the illusion of civilization, now stood a progressive community centered around a medical facility that drew visitors and attention from across the territory. As Charlotte had discovered that snowy February day, sometimes life's most devastating detours lead to destinations far better than those we originally sought. Sometimes rejection becomes the doorway to acceptance. And sometimes a chance recognition across years and distances creates the foundation for a future neither party could have imagined alone. "Come," Nathan said, gesturing toward the medical center's entrance. "Let's welcome our new colleague together." Hand in hand, they walked toward the future they were creating, not just for themselves and their growing family, but for generations of Silver Creek residents to come. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.